Judging by how much you all liked my every RCT Classic Coaster Type in real life video, I thought it'd only make sense to release a follow-up, mostly because, well, the title is a bit misleading. You see, while I did go over every coaster type found in Open RCT2, I accidentally left out a variation that was exclusive to RollerCoaster Tycoon 1, purposefully left out another, and erroneously labeled a third as a reskin. To atone for my sins, I thought it'd be best to make a new video focusing on these odd coaster types, taking a deep look at what may have inspired them, and even hearing from game designer Chris Sawyer himself on the story behind the most mysterious coaster type in the history of the series. While the 4-across inverted coaster train was added in the second RCT1 expansion pack, Loopy Landscapes, there was actually a 2-across train available for the ride from the very beginning in the RollerCoaster Tycoon base game. The 4-across train was obviously inspired by the inverted coasters made by Bolliger and Mabiard, or B&M, but the 2-across train is a bit more puzzling. The design of the track in the game echoes the box track design used by B&M, but 4-across seating is B&M's trademark, with all of their inverted coaster models featuring it. So what inspired this 2-across train? Let's look at the candidates. Yes, I know, I just dismissed B&M due to the whole 4-across seating thing, but it's worth pointing out that B&M does make an inverted coaster model with 2-across seating. Their family inverted coaster model, 2 of which were built in China, with the first one opening in 2014. With RCT1 coming out in 1999, this obviously isn't what inspired the 2-across train, but I thought it'd be worth mentioning. In 1994, 2 years after B&M invented the inverted coaster with Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great America, the Dutch company Vekoma debuted their own version of the inverted coaster, with Condor at what is now Walibi Holland. Their 2-across trains seem to resemble the 2-across trains in the game, but Vekoma's real-world track design definitely does not match. So is this just a Vekoma train placed on a B&M track? Let's look at the other candidates. While I made a point in my first video that this box track design typically signifies B&M, this isn't always the case. You see, Walter Bolliger and Claude Mabiard originally worked as designers at the Swiss firm Giovanola, and before Giovanola began building their own coasters, they acted as a subcontractor for Intamin, a major steel coaster manufacturer, supplying Intamin with rides throughout the 1980s and 90s. Some might recognize this stand-up coaster as Shockwave at Drayton Manor. Its box track and 4-across seating make it seem like it was built by B&M, but it was actually built by Intamin. Walter Bolliger and Claude Mabiard helped design Intamin's stand-up coaster while they worked for Giovanola, coming up with their trademarked box track design and 4-across seating. In 1987, the two left Giovanola and founded their own company, which they named Bolliger and Mabiard, and began to build more stand-up coasters before inventing the inverted coaster in 1992. Despite Bolliger and Mabiard's departure, Giovanola continued to use the track design they came up with, explaining why Giovanola's track looks nearly identical to B&M's. Giovanola only built 3 coasters before going bankrupt in 2004. Their 2 most famous are the twin hypercoasters Goliath and Titan, located at Six Flags Magic Mountain and Six Flags Over Texas, respectively. But people often forget that Giovanola also built an inverted coaster, a mere 7 years after the opening of Batman the Ride, in the same year that RCT1 was released. The ride was Anaconda, located at Gold Reef City in South Africa, and is a spitting image of the original inverted coaster found in the RCT1 base game. RCT2 does not feature this 2-across train, making it an RCT1 exclusive. I was completely unaware of this train while making my first video, as I mostly played RCT2 growing up and only play Open RCT2 now. I also missed the mention of it on the RCT fandom site, as I was fairly sure I knew what inspired the inverted roller coaster and didn't read its page too carefully. It's definitely a bit odd that game designer Chris Sawyer decided to include this obscure one-off model, when the B&M version was much more prevalent, but I won't question the king. The most glaring error in my original video was probably this sentence. Unlike the suspended swinging airplane cars, I'm pretty sure this is just a reskin. And I was pretty sure. I knew that Aerodynamics was the only manufacturer that made a steel single-rail steeplechase model, and I knew that only 2 were ever produced. Blackpool Pleasure Beach's steeplechase featuring horse-shaped cars, and Knott's steeplechase featuring soapbox derby cars. Since I wasn't able to locate a third, I figured the motorbike cars were just a reskin without any real-world inspiration. What I didn't consider was the fact that one of these coasters could have been re-themed at some point, and at what time did have these motorbike-themed cars. If I had scrolled down just a bit further on the RCDB page for Wacky Soapbox Racers, I would have seen that this indeed was the case. Knott's steeplechase coaster was originally called Motorcycle Chase, and featured 4 side-by-side tracks upon which motorcycle-themed cars race, cars just like those found in RCT1. Opened in 1976, the park soon realized that the ride's prototype cars were a bit problematic, with the car's high center of gravity leading to safety concerns. Knott's eventually shut down Motorcycle Chase 4 years later for this very reason. Not wanting to waste their sizable investment, Knott's had Aero-designed new, lower-profile trains for the ride, and after an extensive retheme of the area surrounding the track, the ride reopened as Wacky Soapbox Racers, featuring the boxcar trains introduced in RCT2. Wacky Soapbox Racers continued to entertain guests until 1996, when the beloved coaster was replaced with the dumpster fire that was Windjammer Surf Racers. The spinning cars. Where to begin with these? So, in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1, there was a coaster type called the Steel Mini Roller Coaster, which had 4 different train types: the Ladybird trains, log trains, rocket cars, and the infamous spinning cars. In RCT2, the Steel Mini Roller Coaster was no more, and was instead broken up into 2 different coaster types. The rocket cars joined the newly introduced automobile and toboggan cars to become the Mini Roller Coaster, while the Ladybird and log trains joined forces to become the Junior Coaster. By the way, attentive viewers may have noticed that I didn't address the log trains in my first video, but I'm pretty sure their design was inspired by this coaster, a Sierra Tivoli model which operated at Parc Asterie in France until 2013. But back to the Steel Mini Roller Coaster split in RCT2. Neither the Junior Coaster nor the Mini Coaster became home to the spinning cars, which were left out of RCT2 entirely. You see, the spinning cars behaved a bit differently compared to the other cars found on the Steel Mini Roller Coaster, the most glaring difference being that they could only be used on tracks without banked turns. This handicap, plus the addition of the new spinning Wild Mouse coaster which effectively filled the vacant steel spinning spot, probably led to its non-inclusion. Now for the big question. What real-world ride inspired these cars? The short answer? No one really knows. There is one coaster model that does look the part, the spinning yacht model built by the Chinese firm Jingbei Amusement Equipment. However, there are a couple reasons why this probably wasn't the source of inspiration. For one, most of the rides and vehicles in RCT1 were inspired by real-world rides found in Europe, specifically the UK. But the spinning yacht models are all found in China, and at obscure parks at that, so it's unlikely that Chris Sawyer would have come across them. An even more concrete piece of evidence is the fact that the first spinning yacht creation opened in 2003, 4 years after RCT1 was released, making it certain that Chris Sawyer didn't come across them. You know what they say, when in doubt, go to RCDB. But after scrutinizing every spinning coaster listed on the site built before the year 2000, none of them resemble the look of the spinning cars. Even the denizens of Reddit are stumped as to what these cars may have been inspired by. Perhaps it was a thrill ride of some sort, or maybe it was simply a product of Mr. Sawyer's imagination. In the end, the only person who truly knows is Mr. Sawyer himself. Which got me thinking, if only there was a way I could contact Chris Sawyer and ask him about the spinning cars. A quick Google search led me to ChrisSawyerGames.com, in effect Chris Sawyer's official website. Unfortunately, and not surprisingly, I couldn't contact Mr. Sawyer directly, but I could get in contact with his agent. So I opened up my email, spent way too long typing up and proofreading a message about the spinning cars, and sent it his way, not expecting to get a response back. After all, my inquiry into a specific bit of info on a 22-year-old game was pretty absurd and not business-related by any means. One day went past, nothing. Another day, no response. But on the 3rd day, a message pinged into my inbox. He responded. Not only that, he relayed a message from the man, the myth, Mr. Sawyer himself. As far as I can remember, the spinning cars for the Steel Mini Roller Coaster and the original RollerCoaster Tycoon weren't particularly based on any real prototype. Simon and I were trying to work out what style/type of spinning car would be the most efficient graphically, so we went for something where all 4 quarters of the car are identical, and where the passengers would also be interchangeable for each quarter, i.e. for each seat. This saved a considerable amount of pre-rendered graphic frames while still allowing the car to rotate smoothly at all the different pitch angles required. So with 4 seats placed identically in 4 corners of the car, at 90 degrees to each other, the design looked like it would work best with the seats facing outward, mainly because then you could see the riders better. The closest real-life prototype might be the mock spinning coaster cars, where the seats do face outwards, but they're in pairs instead of facing in all 4 directions. or there's some similarity to the Chinese spinning yacht rides, but these only appeared long after the original RollerCoaster Tycoon was written. In the end, it looks like the spinning cars for the Steel Mini roller coaster was the only coaster type not inspired by any real-world coaster in the first two games, and was an original creation by Chris Sawyer and Simon Foster, the artists who made all the in-game graphics, specifically with graphic efficiency in mind. This response supports my theory about why it was dropped in RCT2, as Mr. Sawyer had figured out how to implement the more realistic Reverchon-inspired spinning coaster by then, rendering the RCT1 design's inclusion unnecessary. I also found it pretty cool that Mr. Sawyer is aware of the Chinese spinning yacht rides. In this case, it looks like it was one of Chris Sawyer's creations that inspired a coaster in the real world. I wanted to give a big thank you to Chris Sawyer, not only for responding to my silly message, but for creating such an incredible game that has stood the test of time and provided hours upon hours of enjoyment to people young and old, all over the world. Do you remember using the Steel Mini spinning cars in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1? Let me know in the comments below. Oh, and thanks for the support you've shown the channel over the past couple months, it really means a lot. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a like, and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more RollerCoaster Tycoon content. As always, thanks for watching.